Hey, I'm Daniel, and recently I heard about a place in Australia which I honestly had never heard of before, so of course I had to look it up on Google Earth, and I was not disappointed to say the least. It came up in a Discord chat from one of my favorite Aussie YouTubers, $2.20. Greetings to you, my friend. And when I looked it up, I had a lot of questions. The port we are talking about is called Port Kembla, located in the same named suburb of the city of Wollongong. I hope I pronounced that right. About an hour south of Sydney. And it looks completely different from what you would imagine an Australian coastal city to look like. Although we have long sandy beaches basically everywhere, the thing that characterizes the area the most is definitely the harbour. We can see a lot of cars, grain silos, cold storage areas and a fucking huge steel mill with industrial areas all around it. And right next to it, a relatively small city with a compact downtown. And all that seemingly in the middle of nowhere. That made me wonder, why exactly here? Why does one of New South Wales' biggest industrial harbours sit in a relatively small city and not in Sydney itself, for example? I mean, Sydney is not too far away. And what role does this industrial place actually play in the region today? Is it even future-proof? That's what we'll find out today. I tell you about the story of Port Kembla, the steel, the harbour and the city that grew around them. If you start zooming in on Port Kembla, the first thing you notice is how big the harbour is compared to the city next to it. The port stretches along several kilometers of coastline, protected by breakwaters and with long jetties, rail yards and ships constantly moving in and out. It's divided into two main areas, the inner harbour, which handles bulk cargo like coal, grain and raw materials, and the outer harbour, where thousands of imported cars arrive every week. In fact, Port Kembla is the largest motor vehicle import terminal in New South Wales. Almost every second car that's unloaded in the state comes through here. But it's not just cars. The port is also a major export hub for grain from southern NSW, and it moves large volumes of bulk materials, cement, fertilizer, copper and even wind turbine components for renewable energy projects. Open 24 hours a day, handling around 30 million tons of cargo each year. Trains constantly arrive from the Imperatur coal mines and the state's interior, linking the port directly to the Southern Highlands and to Sydney's freight network. That rail connection is what made the site so practical. It allows coal and steel products to move straight from the factories and mines to the ships without a detour via Sydney. While Sydney's harbour is more about containers and cruise ships, Port Kembla is where the heavy stuff happens. The coal, the grain, the raw materials and the cars that keep Australia moving. Right next to the harbour, almost blending into it, lies one of the most important industrial sites in Australia, the Port Kembla Steelworks. You can't even really separate the port from the steel plant. They've grown together for almost 100 years. The story starts back in the 1920s, when BHP chose the spot to build a new integrated steelworks. It made sense. Coal from the Illawarra was close by. Iron ore could be shipped straight into the port, and there was enough flat land between the mountains and the sea to build something this big. By the mid-20th century, this place was producing millions of tons of steel, powering construction, railways and the post-war boom across the country. Today, the site is operated by BlueScope Steel, and it's still one of the largest integrated steelworks in the southern hemisphere. It produces around 3 million tons of flat steel each year, used in everything from roofing and cars to wind turbine towers. About 3,000 people work directly here, with thousands more in nearby industry that depend on it. Transport, maintenance, fabrication and port services, for example. Coal trains arrive from the region's mines, raw materials are unloaded from ships and finished steel coils leave the same way. A complete industrial circle that's still running after nearly a century. And even though automation has changed how it operates, the steelworks remains the backbone of Wollongong's economy and a huge part of its identity. For generations, families here have worked in a plant, the rail yards or the port. It's hard to imagine Wollongong without it, even though it tries to reinvent itself, but more on that later. When you move the camera a bit north from the steelworks, the view changes completely. Instead of chimneys on conveyor belts, you see surf beaches, ocean pools and a city dwarfed by its industrial harbor complex. This is Wollongong, home to around 220,000 people, built in a narrow strip of land between the Pacific Ocean and the steep cliffs of the Illawarra Escarpment. It started as a small coal mining town in the 19th century, grew rapidly with the rise of the steel industry, and for decades almost every job was connected to the port or the plant. But the city has changed a lot. As heavy industry declined, Wollongong began to diversify. Today, education and health are among its biggest employers. The University of Wollongong is one of Australia's leading research universities, and the local hospital system serves the whole Illawarra region. There is also a growing tech and services sector, and the city's proximity to Sydney has turned into a commuter hub for people who want to live by the beach but work in Sydney. Still, the industrial side never disappeared. The port, the rail lines and the steelworks are visible from almost everywhere. They're part of the skyline, part of daily life. For many locals, that mix of work and landscape is what defines Wollongong, a place where people can finish a shift at the plant and be swimming in the ocean 20 minutes later. That honestly sounds like a pretty solid lifestyle to me, or what do you think? In a way, the contrast is what makes it interesting. A city that grew from coal and steel but learned how to live besides them instead of depending entirely on them. When you zoom out from Wollongong, you start to see why Port Kembla ended up here. It's close enough to Sydney to stay connected, but far enough away to handle all that ugly heavy industrial stuff. The harbour keeps New South Wales moving. Cars arrive from overseas, grain and steel leave for export, and coal trains descend from the highlands to the docks. But it's also beginning a new chapter. Right now, the port is being prepared for the Port Kembla Energy Terminal, Australia's first LNG import terminal. If completed in 2026, it could supply up to 15% of the state's gas demand and act as a bridge while New South Wales transitions toward renewables. At the same time, parts of the port are being adapted to handle equipment for offshore wind projects, giving this industrial coastline a new role in the energy future. For the Illawarra region, that means the port and the city will continue to evolve together. Heavy industry will stay an important part of the local economy, but it's slowly being joined by new sectors: energy, research, logistics and technology. So while Port Kembla has always been about work, it's also about adaptation. It's not just a reminder of Australia's industrial past, it's part of how the region is preparing for its next chapter. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring this part of Australia with me. If you did, feel free to leave a comment, share your thoughts about Port Kembla or Wollongong, and of course subscribe for more videos like that. See you in the next one. Bye bye.